To unify itself, in other words, Egypt took the intellectually simple approach of raising its rulers to the position of a superhuman symbol, but in human form. Now let's talk for just a moment or two about the religion of Egypt. Religion remained always a medley of so many concepts which themselves changed over the centuries that it is not easily defined, Egyptian religion. Each nome, N-O-M-E, or local district had a sacred totem, often in the form of an animal, and in times of unrest the nomes fought each other as bitterly in the name of these patron deities as did the Mesopotamian city-states. So in the time of unrest, Egypt also fell into chaos, anarchy, inter-Nicene warfare. Higher yet stood a range of greater gods who were conceived in animal as well as human shapes. The visible world had been created out of a watery waste by divine forces, of course, who had also brought the gods into existence. Get that? That's interesting. The gods were a result of divine forces. The gods didn't cause existence, divine forces caused existence, and divine forces caused the gods. This thing where there's a God who creates everything really came later. And the gods governed all aspects of human life no less than did the similar deities of Mesopotamia. One of these gods was Ptah of Memphis, whose P-T-A-H, whose priests created a story that he had formed the world. The sky was worshipped as Horus, H-O-R-U-S, who was a soaring falcon at times, and in yet different concept was the son of Osiris. Yet the sky could also be visualized mythologically as a cow, because you've got the east, the sky, and the west. It's the legs, the belly, and the other legs. A cow, a woman with her belly facing down towards the ground, and her hands and her feet, and Egypt is underneath there. A woman, let's see, and in other ways. The sun disk came to be known principally as Re, R-E, or, from the Middle Kingdom onwards, as Amen-Re, like Amen, Amen-Re. By the time of the New Kingdom, this god, called Amen, in shorter form, or Amen, became steadily more powerful as a combination of the forces of nature. They kept consolidating more and more things into his area, but a host of other deities populated the Egyptian mind. Within the common polytheistic framework, there were marked differences between Egypt and Mesopotamia. So, some similarities, some differences. Here's some marked differences. The gods who watched over the land of the Nile were placed in a far more cheerful light, not as angry, vengeful, hateful towards humans. Not quite so bad that way. While the lot of the Egyptian farmer was one of hard work, his life was considerably more secure than was that of the Mesopotamian peasant, and the Egyptian outlook had a tone of confidence and even enjoyment in life which was quite rare in Babylon. Each day ancient Egyptians celebrated the rebirth of the sun in the east, God's land, and watched with sorrow its disappearance in the land of the dead to the west, because that's sunset. Sun goes down, it's the land of the dead. Each year came a great festival, the rebirth of life, as the Nile flooded and gave water and new fertility to their fields. No festival like that in Mesopotamia, in the sense that the waters rise at the wrong time of year and are virtually no help. Alright, what about the afterlife? These festivals suggest another fascinating difference between Egyptian and Mesopotamian religious views in their concepts of afterlife. In Mesopotamia, men served the gods in this life, but once dead, they had only a shadowy existence. Now, ancient Greece sort of inherited and took that with them. Ancient Greece said when you die, it's a long gray sleep. Only demigods and gods are immortal. The Egyptian, on the other hand, had a very complex picture of the human soul. Accordingly, he buried his dead carefully along the edge of the western desert and gradually developed detailed graphic views of their afterlife. Now, the western desert, because in the east the sun comes up, so in the west the sun going down dies, the dying of the sun every day. You bury your dead in the west, on the west side of the Nile, by the western edge of the desert. Such an emphasis does not mean that the inhabitants of the Nile Valley were morbid, though religious fears did exist and became more pronounced by the time of the New Kingdom. I don't know, they did some pretty morbid things. I think we might be able to stretch it just a little bit and call them morbid. The upper classes at least enjoyed life so much that they wished to cling to its delights even after death. The inscriptions and pictures on the walls and the rich physical equipment buried in the tombs were designed in large part to achieve this aim. So to enjoy life after death. Now, I've got to make a bit of a segue to Osiris. Talk about him for a second. Osiris passed to the underworld, where he was ruler and admitted the dead to his realm after testing their conduct during life on Earth. So here's what happens when you die according to the Egyptians. You go to the underworld and Osiris is there, and he, quote, he is shown at times weighing the soul of a dead man against a feather to see if it were light enough of earthly misdeeds. So they weigh your soul against a feather, and if it's heavier than a feather, then you don't get to go into the afterlife. You're screwed. Alright, on to literature and science in Egypt. Now the arts of Egypt are quite famous, aren't they? Usually Egypt was pretty far behind Mesopotamia in math and so on, and in the alphabet and stuff, but in the arts Egypt was rather accomplished. So let's talk about the literature and the sciences. The heroic figure of Gilgamesh could never have arisen in the land of the Nile, which did not create any significant myths or epics to illuminate the place of man. So they had somehow satisfied, the Egyptians had satisfied themselves about what man is supposed to do. They had shut that question down. They know what man's supposed to do and what man's all about and stuff. They know the metaphysical nature of man. Gilgamesh was a story about the metaphysical nature of man, about what you should do with your life and the fact that you're going to die eventually. They were satisfied with these questions over on the Nile, probably answered by religion. They probably weren't satisfied with them, but they were forced not to question the beliefs that had been handed down from old. If you watch my Ancient Engineering series, you will find that the Egyptians were very conservative. They would build their walls sloping in at the top just so they wouldn't teeter over so easily, and when they started building with stone later, they kept the shape of the old mud brick style walls. But continuing, beyond magical incantations and praises of the ruler, which were only semi-historical, Egyptian literature, Tchaikovsky's, I need to turn it down. Alright, so let's see, beyond magical incantations and praises of the ruler, which were only semi-historical, Egyptian literature consisted of travelers' tales, little stories, and manuals of advice on getting ahead in the world. That was the essence of Egyptian literature. Egyptian sciences also remained on a practical, comparatively simple level. To Egypt we owe a solar calendar of 365 days, which perhaps crystallized about the beginning of the Old Kingdom proper. To 12 months of 30 days each were added 5 days at the end of each year, and the day was divided into 24 hours, so let's pause there for a second. I mentioned earlier the Babylonians gave an approximate 360-day year, and then possibly a 5-day festival maybe at the end of the year or something. I don't know any specifics about how that might have been done, but I do know later on in I don't know what other society, in Persia or in Rome or whatever, there was a society that had a couple extra days on their calendar, and every 3 or 4 or 5 years they had some festival that was like 2 weeks long or whatever, and that would sort of see, this is why these trucks and cars passing is why I have the map on the wall behind me. It's in another room. So at that, so back to the 360-day year, and it's actually 364 and a quarter, 65 and 1/4 is what it is. And so every 4 years you just have like a 3-week festival, or every 3 years, or whatever, you know, whatever the thing was. And even that, after 75 or 100 years, or more like 500 years, even those inaccuracies, because it's not really 365 and a quarter, it's actually 365 and what, 9 hours and 28 minutes or something like that. So even if they get it quite close and they calibrate it by putting an extra festival in,